The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a franchise that is known and loved across all of the world, making the names Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and Raphael immortalized twice over. This came about through the imagination of Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Scott Baldwin represents Manipop in the Edmonton Expo's roundtable interview of Kevin Eastman.
So where should we start?
Everybody's kind of looking at days because it's so early.
Okay. I know, because we were at a show last weekend and we got home on Monday and we packed and came here on Friday.
Okay. Well, the only thing that popped in my head is when you're with all the different merchandise and the stories and the movies and everything, have you ever come across something where you said, no?
Man, when you think it's like, I think in the peak of the turtle licensing, there was about 3,000 licenses worldwide, and all the animated shows and movies, and the products that we'd see, like turtle belts and turtle toiletry kits and all the toys and the pajamas, and it was just amazing to me to see that much stuff. And I think the only thing that we got, that one of the few things that we got that we didn't do, is somebody wanted to do turtle yarmulkes. For I guess to make younger Jewish people wear,
really,
be more.
Yeah, that's like a little.
That was just weird to me. I was like, it's a religious thing, and I don't get it. But no, it was pretty fascinating, and it's even now I think here we are 31 years later since the turtles were created, and the fact that it's 31 years later and we're still talking about turtles is it's mind blowing. We never thought the first issue of the comic would sell, and the fact that it went on to the cartoons and movies. And
I heard you did boxes and boxes.
Yeah,
number one. So you're just.
Yeah, I do actually. There's a really fun. If you guys have time today, I do this. I'm doing a panel today, and I do a little slideshow. It's about 60 slides, and I go through the early days of creation, some of the early conventions, and some of that stuff. So you can see some pretty neat footage. And I talk about current projects like the work I've been doing with IDW and the new animated series and stuff. So if you get a chance to check that out, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, cool.
We can go that way. We're going on the table.
How did you come up with the idea?
It was a joke, really. Both Peter Laird and I grew up as huge fans of comic books. We still are. We're still big geeks. Jack Kirby was a huge influence, and so both of us grew up. Me in Maine, Peter in Massachusetts, but we both grew up with the dream and the desire to write and tell our own stories, to be Jack Kirby, basically. And I met him when I was trying to sell some of my cartoons to a local newspaper in Massachusetts, and the paper was like, well, we don't really publish your kind of work, but you draw a lot like this guy Peter Laird, the same weird superhero stuff and that kind of stuff. And so I met Pete, and we hit it off from day one, kind of bonded over Jack Kirby. And about 7 or 8 months later, he ended up moving to close to where I lived. I grew up in Maine. I cooked lobsters in the summer for the Memorial Day to Labor Day to the tourists. And we said, well, let's form a studio. We didn't have a studio; it was our living room, so we called it Barrage Studios. And late one night, I had this idea. I was a big fan of Bruce Lee, and I said, if Bruce Lee was an animal, what would be the silliest, stupidest animal that Bruce Lee would be? And I thought of a turtle. And so I did this one drawing of Michelangelo before he was named Michelangelo. That was the first turtle ever drawn. Mask on, nunchuck strapped to his arms, and I put it on his desk and and said, this is going to be the next big thing, ha ha ha. And it got the laugh that I wanted from him, and of course, studio one-upmanship. He did a drawing, changed some things. I laughed, and of course I had to top his drawing, so I did this one sketch of 4 turtles, each with different weapons, standing in this kind of dramatic pose, and put this cartoony Ninja Turtle comic book title on it. I did the drawing in pencil, and when he inked it in, he added Teenage Mutant to the title, and we looked at it and said, this is the dumbest thing we've ever seen. And I'd love to say we didn't have any distracting pain work going on at that time. So we said the next day we got up and said, you know, why don't we come up with a story that tells how these characters got to be the Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and inspired by early innovators like Dave Sim, who did Cerebus, lives in Kitchener, I think, to self-publish. So I had a $500 income tax return. We cleaned out all $200 of Pete's bank account. I borrowed $1,000 from my uncle, and that was enough money to print the first issue of 3,000 copies. And again, we were positive we wouldn't sell a single copy. And so when we actually got the books back from the printer, we brought them into the studio and we made furniture out of them. We had a coffee table, boxes of turtle books, and then tables and stuff. Then it started selling, and that was May of 1984 was when the first issue came out. So.
And you ran out of furniture.
And we ran out of furniture. we sold enough books to pay back my uncle and buy a desk, so I guess you could buy some furniture. Kind of cool. Still hard to believe it's 31 years ago. Yes, ma'am. Oh, want to jump over this side?
Yeah, I think we decided we're going to go one for each.
Oh, okay,
of
sure.
what's here, so.
Okay, I'm happy to go with that. All the way over to the end.
Thank you. One of my favorite things about the comics and of course the cartoons is their fondness for pizza. And where did the idea behind the fondness for pizza come from?
In high school, I worked at a pizza place, and it was funny. Even in high school, this guy I worked for was Louis' Variety. It was a pizza store, pizza place, pizza deli, and so I ate a lot of pizza. And my boss, who knew I loved to draw, and he said, "Well, this is great because you can eat here while you work, and then you can save your money to buy art supplies." And that's something I stuck with for quite a while. I worked in even when they did. That wasn't that funny.
They're having fun.
They have alcohol over there.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding. And so that's something I stuck with. I cooked lobsters in the summer. That was a summer job. You know, growing up in Maine, it was very touristy, and so I'd save my money all summer, and I'd be able to take night classes and be able to buy paint and pencils and art supplies. So so I could eat and afford to be an artist, so to speak.
Nice. No such thing as a starving artist.
Oh man, that's so true. But yeah, pizza. So it's like, I cooked a lot of pizzas, and it was one of those things that you think of. You're talking about a concept as goofy and bizarre as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What else would they eat? Pizza. We had too much fun coming up with the story. Oh, cops.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yes, back over.
Oh, okay. I noticed that in the previous magazine, there's an edition of Batman and the Turtles.
Very exciting.
Yes. How did that come apart?
Well, it's funny because the Turtles. I grew up reading comic books. Batman was one of my favorites. Daredevil was one of my all-time favorites, and a bunch of other. Jack Kirby's Commandy was one of my. When I was growing up as a kid, I had my paper route in Maine, and I'd make enough money to buy 5 or 6 comics a month. And Kirby's Commandy was it, and that's I think where a lot of the mutant animal influence came from. And but the Turtles have been around for 31 years, and it was people would ask at conventions over the years, like if you could do a crossover, which would be one of your favorite characters, Daredevil, Batman, those kind of things was always I'd love to see them together. And so we started talking to DC about a year and a half ago about doing this idea, and they warmed up to it. And so 6 issues starting in November, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
It looks really interesting.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. So
You know,
Turtles and
two
Batman.
together. Yeah.
After all these years, it's kind of a neat milestone. So because we never even thank goodness for the Turtles when I started working on the comic. We started making enough money that we could afford just to draw comic books, and growing up and wanting to be a cartoonist, wanting to be a comic book artist. The dream was always to get a job at Marvel or DC. They were really the main two, and we just never did. So 31 years later, here we are now, finally working with a mainstream character. So I'm pretty excited. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it looks interesting.
Thank you. Can't wait. Who's up next?
Do you have any advice for as I have some junior journalists here, do you have any advice for people trying to get into comic book drawing?
Sure. Well, it's if the love and the passion for it is there, it's like because it's unfortunately mostly not a group sport. You know what I mean? A team sport that much. It's like, you know, it ends up with, you know, you as an artist, if you're writing and drawing your own stuff, or even if you're writing or drawing stuff, you're alone in a room, maybe with the TV, the radio going, and you have to draw. You have to sit there like any other job. Even my wife and I, we have a son who's 9, and he still doesn't think I have a real job. He's like, you know, Dad, I have to go to school, and I have to do this stuff. You just stay home and draw turtles all day. And it's like, yes, but it's still, you know, it's a job. I sit there and I draw, and I love it. But advice is, if you love it, you have to draw every day, you have to practice every day. If you write, you have to write every day. Get used to making that, you know, brain-hand connection, page connection. One bit of advice I got that I always remembered very fondly, and most importantly, when I was in high school, comic books were still, you know, I graduated in 1980. When I was in high school, comics were still sort of a joke. They were like, you can't really make a living. People really don't make a living doing comic books. And so when I would tell people proudly I'm going to be, you know, a comic book artist, a comic book storyteller, they'd be like, yeah, first, you're never going to move out of the basement. You're going to be living at home for the rest of your life. You're one of those kind of people. And, you know, you can't really make a living and support a family with it. And my high school art teacher said, she didn't look down her nose and didn't dismiss it as an art form, as I thought it was. She said, well, that's very interesting. You're very ambitious. You draw a lot. And to me, if you're going to write and draw and tell a comic story, you have to be able to draw everything you see. Paper cups, plates, tables, chairs, a room full of people. If I had to draw a comic story that had me talking to all of you, I have to be able to draw every single thing you see in this room. You know, every one of you people that looks a little bit different. My sunglasses, these chairs, and perspective. So she would give me all these assignments to draw, you know, furniture and cars and sketch from real life. And then, you know, because each panel has to be drawn in a way that you can draw everything, but you also have to be able to pace a story. So it's like, I used to look at a lot of my favorite TV shows and movies and see what directors were doing, how they would tell a story, how they would cut to different scenes. So draw every day, practice every day, love what you do. I still do. I'm 53 and I've been doing comics for 31 years and I still love it. And what's different about today, what's fantastic about today, if you're trying to get your comic books or your creations out there, is we have the internet. Back in my day, we didn't have cell phones or even fax machines back then, and no internet. So self-publishing or publishing your own comic book was the only way you could kind of get your material out there. Today, you have these great social networks, you know, comic groups, DeviantArt, which is a great social media, comicart.org. You have places where you can showcase your ideas, meet other creators from around the world. Even all the, you know, it's like, I started working with this guy on the new Batman book, and he's a comic artist that lives in Hungary. And so we Skype twice a week, and so I do my work in San Diego and scan the stuff and send it to him, and he's in Hungary and he colors it. He's 9 hours ahead, and so we send stuff back and forth. But it's a global network, so there's a lot of places and a lot of ways to get your work out there. It's pretty exciting, actually. So practice, practice, practice. Write, draw. And it'll happen. So. Yes, sir.
So what was your reaction to the first news that the Ninja Turtles would be made into a live action film? And of course, you know, with the puppets and stuff in 1990.
Well, you know, what was interesting, it was crazy because, again, if you take it back to the beginning where, you know, when we did the comic book, we didn't think we'll sell a single copy of the comic book. When the comic started selling and we were drawing and it was selling pretty well, we started getting approached probably in 1987, 88 with people that said, different agents and different companies that said, we think this can be much more than a comic book. We think it could be toys and cartoons. And we were like, no, I mean, it barely worked as a comic, you know, who's going to buy a turtle action figure or a turtle cartoon show? And so the cool part was, when we started working on it, we knew that the comic books and the stuff we were writing were written for an older audience, which we wrote them for ourselves mainly. And when we started working on the cartoon show, we knew it was going to be for a much younger audience, so we changed like the different colored bandanas so you could tell them apart a little bit better, and we softened up the origin story and things like that. And when the cartoon show came out and people liked it, we were like, holy smokes, this is amazing. And then the toys came out and they sold out. They sold very well. And so by the first year, I think in 1988, we had a regular cartoon series and the toys were selling really well. And then we got approached to do a live action movie. We're like, oh my goodness, how do you comic books are 2D and it's sort of that, and the cartoons are it's animated, that's easy, but how do you bring this to life as a live action idea? And luckily, and thank goodness, we get to work with Jim Henson, who built the costumes and stuff, and he's really the guy that brought them to life in a way that they worked. You could see them on the screen and you could believe.
Yeah.
You see the the flaws and you can see certain things in it, but you actually believe the way that he was able to bring these characters to life and make them act and react and have emotion and all that. So that was a pretty. Steve Barron was the director and Jim Henson did the costumes, and that was great because it was almost right in the middle of the black and white comic books and the animated series. The movie had a little bit of both, had a little bit of edge to it that the black and white comics had, and had a lot of the same pizza and fun and antics of the animated series. So.
And the puppets look great as well. Even though they're not like ultra realistic CG, it's still a wonder, that they were able to, make it translate really well to live action as well.
Yeah, it really was. I remember, and I tell a story when I do my slideshow, because I got some images from going down on the movie set and stuff, and it was, we'd seen the costumes being built and some videotape and stuff, and they looked really cool, but when we went down to Wilmington, North Carolina, when they were doing the first movie, you go on a studio back lot and it looks like a construction site about ready to fall down practically, and you sort of go to the back of it, and then when you come around this corner, all the facades and all the movie magic, there's New York City. It was a night shoot, it was lit up and you believed you were in the middle of New York, so we're kind of like, wow, this is great. And then we walked around the next corner and there were the four turtles in full costume. Michelangelo had a sombrero on, was dancing around, and some of them were stretching and doing this stuff, and that was the first time we seen them, moving, and we were like, oh my goodness, they are real and they're in front of us right now. So it was a pretty amazing accomplishment. So it's cool. Yes, sir.
All right. Back to the follow-up to another question. Now the Turtles and Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Is it other things starting to pop in your head? Who else?
Well, it was we did what was cool, and I think what helped the Turtles Batman come to life was we got to do a Turtles Ghostbusters crossover last year, which was I grew up, Ghostbusters to me was a huge movie. I just loved the creativity in it. So Turtles Ghostbusters, that was really successful and a lot of fun, which I think helped lead to the Batman possibility, and they're talking about doing another Ghostbusters Turtles crossover. But yeah, there's ideas. Personally, I'd love to see a Turtles Commandy crossover. I've written a proposal for it, and we'll see if we can.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you can, through the magic of comics and time travel or dimensional travel or whatever, you can do lots of.
Now, would you look for someone who had the same style as Kirby?
Well, it would basically be, if I did it, it's such a passion project that it's something I would do.
You would do it yourself?
I would do it
Yeah.
myself. I'd want to write it and draw the whole thing. So like 4 issues or 6 issues or something. So.
I grew up on Green. It's one of the books I'm looking to find a good copy.
Yeah.
Because that's what I grew up reading.
Me too. It was like back when comics were 20 cents.
Yeah.
So we probably only have time for one more quick question.
Oh, my
Because
goodness.
we gotta get you back to your table.
This is too much fun. I'm sorry. So, and I tend to talk a lot. But I was gonna say too that, and thank you. But there's we have a panel today, and I'm not sure what time it is. My wife, who organizes everything, I have a panel today. But I do, like I said, it's about a 25-minute slideshow. Covers a lot of history and stuff, and then there's question and answers at the end. So if you guys get a chance, if you're around, come to the panel. You can see some stuff. You can videotape it, and if you have any other questions, if we missed anything, you can ask a question there.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
All right.
So flip a coin. Who wants to ask the last one?
Oh.
Go ahead.
The one question I have is, how did you come up with the idea of having their sensei or teacher kind of thing to be like a mutated rat?
Well, it was one of those things that when you start piecing together the origin story, there were so many, bizarre elements and different influences that came into play, like even, you know, people ask a lot, you know, how did you come up with the names? You know, Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, and I was a big, huge fan of art history in high school, and when Pete and I were talking about the names, traditional Asian names seemed perfect, but not silly enough for Ninja Turtles. Doug, Bob, Steve, still not funny enough. And in high school, I did this big painting, and it's actually in my slideshow too, of my tribute to Leonardo da Vinci in high school. It's this big mural. And I just blurted out, well, how about Leonardo and Michelangelo? And he said, oh, that's really funny. And then Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael were the easiest. And then we had a long discussion about Donatello because I like Bernini as a sculptor better. So we went back and forth and coin toss got Donatello. But in the story, well, when the turtles unfortunately fall into the sewer with the canister of mutagen that strikes this poor young man is standing precariously close to a sewer opening that's open to carrying this terrarium, and the canister strikes them and goes down into the sewer. You know, and it gets exposed to the mutagen. Well, it's like, what else would be down there in a New York sewer that would be appropriate? Alligators, that's a little silly. Well, there's lots of rats in New York, so we had the rat get mutated and just made it the sensei because it was just sort of, you know, New York City sewer rat mutation. And, you know, we wrote the first issue was so much a, you know, kind of a parody and a joke. We put favorite bits of comics that we liked and kind of put them all into a blender and came up with a story. So most of the stuff that, you know, the origin of the Turtles was just luck and, you know, piecing together ideas like, well, that makes sense and that makes sense and that doesn't make sense, but let's do it anyway. So, but he's a great character. So. Awesome, you guys. Well, like I said, we get the last question. The slideshow. When's the slideshow, my love? Do you remember?
The
panel, rather.
Signing is from 10 to 12.
First Lady of the Turtles, everybody.
10 to noon signing. Photo ops 1:30, and the panel isn't on here, but I think what they gave us. I have it on mine as 12:30 to 1:15 in room 104.
Oh, there you go. 12:30 to 1:15 in 104. So yeah, if you missed any questions, you want to ask anything else, or check out stuff on the slideshow. There's lots of detail and lots of information. So thank you all for coming, getting up early, and all that stuff. So
Thank you, sir.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for making time, guys.
Oh, it's awesome.